you know, you support refugees. You're not here fighting a political cause and making a political statement. But, you know, for Boris Johnson to say there's no moral equivalent between what Hamas did and what Israel is doing now, that's a difficult one to argue, isn't it?
Well, what Hamas did is unconscionable. No one can excuse it. But the impact of what Israel's doing is so terrible. Every 10 minutes a child dies in Gaza. And, you know, going after Hamas is exactly the right thing to do, but it shouldn't be at the cost of so many children dying. I mean, more children have died.
It's not just children, there's innocent men, innocent women as well.
For sure. I mean, some people dare to say that all the Palestinians are responsible for what Hamas is doing. I don't agree with that position.
Well, I know for a fact, I mean, you know, I was brought up in the conflict in Northern Ireland, and the easy thing was always to say, leave them all alone and let them fight it out between themselves. That is assuming that every Catholic was a Republican and every Protestant was a loyalist, which I can simply tell you was not true.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I was in Brighton when the IRA bombed the Conservative Party hotel, and we didn't go and bomb Belfast. We recognised there is a difference between a civilian population and a terrorist organisation that's embedded inside. The number of deaths is astronomical. I mean, this is more children dying in 4 weeks than normally would die in all the conflicts in the world in a year. That includes Ukraine.
Yeah, and there's been this discussion about collective punishment. That's obviously illegal under international law, and as Eamon makes that equivalent, you know, it's not like the whole of Belfast would have been bombed in response to whatever the IRA were doing because of the civilian impact. We're hearing this morning that Palestinians are waking up once again, not only to further bombardment and possibly some of the worst since this war broke out, but a blackout again. No media, no phone calls. Very hard to get a sense of what's happening there this morning. But the Israeli Defense Force have now encircled Gaza City, and they say they have split the strip in half, and they've also reached the sea. So they will say they are making significant progress, but this is a long, drawn-out thing. You know, everybody talks about the two-state solution in all of this, but do you think there's any appetite from either side to see some sort of resolution like that?
It's very difficult to talk about sides. Hamas don't care about civilians. They don't care about killing civilians in Israel, and they don't care about the deaths of Palestinian civilians. So there's not two sides to negotiate with. It doesn't feel fair. And the Israeli bombings are taking out schools, refugee camps,
there has
ambulances.
to be a different way to conduct that war. I mean, you've got a terrorist organisation who are hiding under the skirts of women and children here with this. So surely, to goodness, Israel must see, yes, as you say, go after Hamas, but there must be a different way, special forces or something like that.
I think if there can't be a ceasefire, perhaps Mr. Johnson in his time in Israel could use his considerable international weight to argue for a humanitarian evacuation. Could we, like we did in the Second World War, when people were bombing our cities, take children out of the equation?
It's interesting.
If it's impossible to convince Israel to a ceasefire or a pause or whatever we're going to call it, surely there should be a way to get children out.
But the dilemma is, where do they go? Egypt, sure enough, doesn't want them. And Lebanon has its own problems. Jordan has already been inundated with refugees over the years. Where do they go? If there was to be this humanitarian pause, who is going to take them in?
Yeah, and that's where organisations like yours come in, and we're just hearing today that Israel is giving, not Israel, Egypt is giving 72 hours for refugees to ship out of Israel. They've overstayed their visa, they've overstayed their welcome. Where on earth do these people go?
Well, Hamza Youssef, the Scottish leader, has said there needs to be a global response. We at the Sanctuary Foundation have had a couple of hundred people say that people could come to their homes, like we did for Ukraine. I don't think we can take everybody, but wouldn't it be incredibly powerful if the UK could say, you know what, we'll take the first 1,000 mothers and children? Perhaps that would prompt a global response.
Interesting. Krish, how do you see this playing out? I mean, surely if we make a claim to be civilized in any way, the world cannot allow this to continue.
No, it can't, and it's not wrong to stand with Israel to fight Hamas and at the same time stand with the civilians of Palestine. You know, the number of people that are dying is equivalent. When we had the initial attack by Hamas into Israel, we said this was like Israel's 9/11. In fact, the death toll, when factored in for population, it's about 16 times what 9/11 would have been.
Or Pearl Harbor combined.
Exactly, In the same way, if you factor for population, the number of deaths in Palestine is 500 times what happened in 9/11. So the world has to draw a pause and say, look, we need to intervene. We need to either get civilians out or call for a humanitarian ceasefire.
And, you've made it quite clear that you're not being political about this, that, a life is a life. And, people will hear what they want today. But this terrible divisiveness, if you're not for Israel, you're against them. If you're not for the Palestinians, you're against them as well. People have got to see this. I don't know. I just don't know. Well, people can't see the value of lives. They just see you're either for Israel or you're for Palestine.
I think you can be for humanity. Imagine two £20 notes that come out of a cash machine. One is pristine and the other one is screwed up. Which one is worth more? Actually, silly question, both are worth £20. Same with a £20 note that had a Israeli flag on it. Same with a £20 note that had a Palestinian flag on it. Every human being has intrinsic value, wherever they're from, whatever their country of origin, and we can't allow civilians just to keep on dying.
Well, good luck to you and your work, the work you're trying to do with the Sanctuary Foundation. They are a charity supporting refugees to find work and worthwhile housing in the UK. And there is a whole other problem, but good luck to you with that. I mean, if I could say something, just over the past couple of weeks, I've been staying in a number of hotels, and almost exclusively the staff have been Ukrainian, and they've been educated and they've been polite, and I look at them and I think they have all fled the war, and they've all been taken in by the UK, and I think we're probably a richer society for it. Again, that's not a political statement for me, that's just necessity, the way it is.
We are a richer family for the fact that we were able to host Ukrainian refugees. They brought so much joy to our lives, to our children's lives. We saw them, particularly the kids, go from so terrified to feeling at ease and playing with our kids. I think the children of Gaza need a similar option.